Oh, are we starting? So I'm talking to you the whole time.
Yeah. Me.
Can I be gregarious?
Please be gregarious.
Can I do this?
Rolling.
Somebody described what you guys did as the most punk rock thing in comics ever. Basically, shoot the finger to the man. Sure, you were comic book nerds, but you did your thing.
Nerd punks. Can we coin that? Nerd punk.
Nerd punk. Copyright that afterwards.
Nerd punk. Yeah. Copyright.
Who initially had the idea for Image? Was it Rob? Was it Todd? Who did you first hear about it from?
I first heard about it from Todd, but I believe it was Rob and Todd, and I think Jim Valentino early on. And I know that Eric Larson was part of the early conversations. And ironically, I heard about it in New York because I was visiting Marvel Comics for an X-Men summit, a creative summit. And I think Rob Liefeld at the time already, knew that, okay, we're gonna do something. I don't know if it was called Image Comics at that time or whatever, but him and Todd had already cooked this thing up and it was gonna happen. Where, however many guys, there was no number at that time, however many guys were gonna break away and start their own thing. So Rob was actually at that same meeting.
Yeah, because he was part of the X family at the time.
Yeah, he was part of the X family with X-Force. So it was like this big X-Men meeting with all the major players, creative and editorial. So I had this idea that I was going to pitch at the meeting. I think Bob Harris was kind of the guy. And he was conducting the meeting and he said, anybody have any ideas and all this stuff? And I started pitching this idea of these mutants, but here's the thing, they're cybernetically enhanced. And I want to call it Cyberforce. And Rob would tell me later that, because he was at the meeting, he's going, don't say anything. Save this for Image Comics. We're going to talk to you. Save it for Image. Oh, it's a great idea. Save it for Image. Which, Marvel didn't bite. So
they flat out said no.
Yeah, it's like Cyberforce wound up as my first Image book. But after that meeting, ironically, we were there on Marvel's dime, but Image was forming.
The same New York City weekend, right?
It's the same weekend because that's also when they approached Jim Lee, and Jim Lee was known as the Golden Boy. And Todd's thing has always been, look, if we can get Jim Lee, we got him, we win. If we can get Jim Lee on board, we win. But I was also part of that formula. Because I was on the next book, so I kind of mattered.
Yeah, you absolutely mattered because you had been a top X-Men artist for a while. Interesting, because to a lot of people, they would think that what you guys did would be a tremendous risk because you guys could fall flat on your faces.
Well, the sexy story is it was all risk, right? It's like these guys went off, they did their own thing. It's like, the reality is, even looking back in 2020, we could have gone back. The biggest risk was embarrassment and the lack of opportunity. That was really the biggest risk because the rewards were huge if it worked. If Image worked, the rewards were you own your IP, you own your idea, you can do whatever you want. And this was, you gotta remember, this 25 years ago. So things were just starting to look like other media exists. It wasn't like it is today where it's just part of it. Where you know that other media is looking at what you do every month. The studios and the networks have people that look at comic books every month to come to them. It's like, oh, this one's cool. Back then, that wasn't the case, but there was rumblings that could happen. Batman had come back with Tim Burton. So it's like, oh, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, we don't know. But point was, if it worked, which obviously it did, we were in control of our own destiny. And I remember Jim Lee, who was always a very pragmatic guy. If Todd was the big gambler and Rob was just the hyper-energetic, let's try this, let's put on a show type of guy, Jim was always very pragmatic and he would always do the math. And I remember, because he was making a lot off of X-Men on the royalties, and he would go, if I can just make this amount, how many books would I need to sell for Image? And the number was not even that high. It's like, okay, because we get a much bigger cut.
You get
aside from just owning the IP, your cut of the publishing was much bigger if it all came to you. Mm-hmm. You spread it to whoever, whatever the costs were, but it was still much, much higher. And I think when the Youngblood numbers came in, whatever Jim's number was, I think it was like 20 times what he needed to go, this is worth it. It's like, oh, okay, then it's fine. And it was a very specific time in comics history and pop culture history where that could work, where the creators / artists mattered enough that if they left and formed their own thing, people would care.
That was a very specific time because the business had changed to being very much more about the artist and their contribution. That was really, I think, when comic fans really, truly appreciated the artist role more than anything. And you could see it in the sales. Then you had the speculator market adding to that.
And that was part of why Image worked at that time. And because of the fan response, or again, at that moment in history, in some cases, the creator was more popular than the character. And I think the audience was hungry for that, was hungry for that connection of who was behind their favorite characters. So when Image became Image, when all these people left Marvel at the same time, if people wanted what those creators created, they had to go to Image. And they wanted what those creators created because there was this weird mystique about the people behind the paper. You know, that, and again, in some circumstances, surpassed what was actually on the paper. So you had this perfect storm. And that's how Image was able to happen. Because there was such a frenzy for it that they just bought and bought and bought and bought and bought Image. Which allowed us to do really stupid things, which we did repeatedly. We stumped our toe daily, several times, all of us.
Who was figuring out which role in the company? Like you mentioned Todd probably leading the business side of things. You know, Rob was obviously the enthusiastic guy, the inspirational guy, right? Who was figuring out which role in the company? Like what about you and the rest of the guys?
You know, we used to call it like the Todd, Rob, and Jim show, because those were the biggest names. You know, and we jokingly used to refer to Todd as the Todd Father.
He refers to himself as the Todd Father.
Well, there you go. You know, because regardless of really like who started what or whose idea was at first, I mean, he became immediately like the guy that epitomized Image. You know, the spirit of Image Comics, and the guy that would negotiate the big deals with like Diamond Distribution and the other distributors that were around at that time. We always kind of looked to Todd. You know, it's like we would talk about ideas and what we wanted to do, and we all kind of would stop and everyone was looking at Todd. You know, it's like, and then Todd would like just start doing his Todd thing, which was like, okay, pontificating about this is what we need to do, and you know, most of the time, you know, he was dead on. You know, that's okay. That's what we should do.
Did this revitalize your interest, getting back in comics, like this new venture, this new risk? / not really a risk?
It was a risk to a certain degree in that because the rewards, at least reality or fantasy, were great if it worked. So we always had that in the back of our minds that if it didn't work, it was a failure because of the potential of it. Not that we couldn't get a job, but the potential of how great it could be. And for me, it's like it completely re-energized me for comics. It completely gave me a reason to be back in comics, both emotionally and, you know, mentally, spiritually even, back in comic books. Because now there was a new plateau to reach. You know, I had peaked when I did X-Men. There's a new peak now, you know, a new Everest to climb. That, at least at that time, was limitless. There was no longer a visible peak to Mount Everest. You know, it was hidden by these clouds of dreams. You know, you would look up and like, oh, you can only see so high because there's this cloud of dreams, but above it there's even more peak. So there was always that. You know, and to this day that exists because there is no real limit. And I think that's part of the endearing and most lasting legacy of Image Comics, is that there's always going to be a mist, a line of clouds hiding the ultimate peak. And that ultimate peak is always going to be there. And I think that's a beautiful thing as a creator, you know, to not see the ceiling. There's no ceiling. You know, there's no limit to what could happen with what you do, with what you create.
You guys really define the art style for the 90s in comics, depending on how you look at it, for better or worse, right? But when you look back on it now, what do you think, can you look back and say, oh wow, we were putting out some good art? And specifically, were there any of those guys that you would look at and say, oh man, that was some incredible art? And it's okay to brag about yourself.
I actually, ironically, I don't really like a lot of my 90s work. I think I was trying to be someone I was not. I think I was trying to be more Jim Lee. There's only one Jim Lee, Let him be Jim Lee. But I think I was kind of caught up with, okay, what was going to get the most eyeballs, and the most dollars. So there's a lot of stuff that I look back and go, I didn't really know what I was doing when I was doing that. I actually like the work I'm doing now more than back then. We're not athletes. There's no expiration date on us. If you're an athlete and you get older, it doesn't matter how much you work out. You're just not going to bench press as much. You're not going to run the 40 as fast. You're just not. As an artist, you have no excuse other than, I don't feel like getting better. So I like to think that for me, the 90s was a big learning experience creatively and artistically.
In all the ways that you guys impacted the comics industry and pop culture, is there one single aspect of that you're particularly proud of?
It's the power to the creator. I think that's the one I'm most proud of. And I think the Image Brotherhood is most proud of the fact that even though there were independent publishers and people doing things on their own beforehand, it never hit the mainstream like Image Comics did. And the fact that to this day, it is about the creator and what they create and that they own it and they control it and they can do what they want with it. I think that's the legacy that we're all the most proud of. And I think that attitude has bled into other media as well. I think a lot of people that are in other creative media kind of grew up on Image Comics. And the fact that creators could have more of a say in themselves and could gamble on themselves, could gamble on their future.
Some of those creators that helped bring on Robert Kirkman, who's kind of had a minor success at Image Comics.
Robert's the poster child of how Image works, like the ultimate. He's that guy that he's beyond the peak. He's beyond the cloud cover,
clouds.
Right? It's like that's where the peak is, right? And still climbing. So, he's the best success story Image could possibly have. For us, it's always a great selling point to get people on board. Creator-owned works, and the way Image is structured, we don't own anything. The fact that it works, and the fact that we are a way for people that maybe couldn't or don't want to do mainstream type stuff, superhero stuff or what have you, to get their ideas out there and potentially be the next Robert Kirkman, that's a great thing.
Why haven't you had McFarlane Toys create a line of 25th anniversary Cyberforce toys? Because I'm bringing that up because of the aborted animated series that was this close to being made.
Yeah, it's like I just saw an article the other day. I didn't read it because I want to be reminded of that time in my life, but the headline was enough for me. It said, cartoons you almost grew up on. Because back in the day, this was when the X-Men cartoon had finished its run, and Fox Kids was the place for cartoons back then. That was it. You had a cartoon on Fox Kids, you were the next Ninja Turtles. And we had it all lined up. We were going to be the replacement for the X-Men. Cyberforce. And I think Rob Liefeld also.
The idea that Marvel turned down at the retreat.
Right, and Rob had Youngblood, and we were going to be the Image Action Hour. We actually had the animation house that did the X-Men. We had Mattel toys. They actually made toys, Cyberforce toys. You can find them on eBay. And we had scripts written for the Cyberforce cartoon. Right when the decisions were being made to move forward, Saban Entertainment came in and bought Fox Kids. And I think the first order was anything not Marvel gets tossed.
And there went the Image Action Hour.
There went the Image Action Hour, and there went the whole Marvel Mattel thing. I was like, oh, that was a bad meeting. Because, they would call us every week and said, okay, how's it going? How's the TV show going? It's like, oh, it's still on track. We're still good. And suddenly, we're not so good anymore. But they made the toys. This probably a couple $1 million they probably spent on those toys, and they're cool toys. They even made a Hot Wheel of it. That came out.
Ginormous woulda, coulda, shoulda, I think.
Yeah,
the story of how we almost got a Cyberforce animated series.
We were that close. So, and I kind of look at it and go, you know what, it's just a life experience. In that case, it didn't happen. But back in the day, for actors and directors and producers and studios, it would have been a step down to do a comic book property. Now you've got the biggest names in Hollywood wanting to be part of the next franchise. So the talent pool for what we do outside of comics, it's enormous. It's night and day. And I'm thankful for that. We can get a AAA game made, like of the Darkness. And I'm proud of those games. And again, those are properties that we own and we control. We always had the one thing in common. It's like, screw the haters. We're not going to let them win. We are going to show them that we can make this happen, because they all said, I mean, Marvel and DC, they all said, you guys are going to last 6 months. You know, why don't you just come back now? You know, that was 25 years ago. You know, so that was always the thing that we had going for us, is that, okay, you're an asshole, but we're brothers in this together. All right, we have a vision of creator ownership, of being the captain of your own ship, the master of your destiny. You know, it's like, well, whatever. That's the brotherhood. You know, so regardless of the fights, and there were epic fights. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that we were comic book nerds and we didn't know how to fight,
It would have gotten bloody.
It would have gotten bloody. You know, it's like we were fighting with, you know, or we'd be fighting like this, like
Thumb wars,
breaking our own thumbs, and when
a special crossover event.
No fighting skills whatsoever.
Mark, thanks for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.